Carol Lee says, you're at the center of the policy world in education. You have the voice of the President of the United States, the Secretary of Education, key members of Congress, and congressional staff. You understand education, from the work of the classroom teachers to school districts, state boards of education to the public policy. And she says that's just profound. Tell us about the greatest impact you feel you have had thus far at the national level.
Well, it's always hard to gauge. Because policy making is like sausage making. I can think of two things that I can see a pretty clear line from work I did to outcomes that were in legislation. One was in the No Child Left Behind Act. There is the provision that all students should have highly qualified teachers, and federal funds should be used for those teachers. And it has been implemented in a way that has had challenges. When you write legislation, it becomes very complicated very quickly. But that idea was one that I shared with Department of Education staff when I was asked to come in and do a briefing in the last part of the Clinton years. And they said, well, what's one thing that we ought to do in ESEA when it's reauthorized? I said, well, if there's one thing you could do, it would be to be sure that all kids have great teachers. Because right now, the targets of federal policy, children with disabilities, English language learners, students who are low achieving and low income, actually are highly likely to get completely unqualified teachers. And in fact, that had been increasing over the course of the 80s and 90s, really over the tail end of the 90s. I said, so, if you really wanted to make a difference, you'd say, you have to use these funds to get really thoughtfully prepared teachers in all these classrooms rather than letting the kids who we're supposedly supporting have a revolving door of people without the knowledge and skills to help them. And in fact, I later learned that conversation led to that provision in the law. More recently, the president was very interested in this problem of assessment. And he talked in the campaign about how we need tests that go way beyond bubbling in, that we shouldn't have our kids just studying for the test all year long, that we needed to measure creativity and problem solving and thinking skills. And that's very unusual for a president to take that on. Hasn't been in the conversation previously. And when we were briefing him on the transition plan, the thing he wanted to talk about the most was, what are we going to do about testing? And I talked to him about what other countries were doing and the much more open-ended, performance-based assessments that are in use in Australia and the UK and Singapore and many other places. And he said, well, that's what we should do. So when the department was beginning its process of figuring out what to do with the race to the top money around assessment, I helped organize a seminar for them, and we brought in people from Australia and from Singapore and from Finland. Well, actually, I think Finland was for a different seminar, and from Canada, and had leading people in the department and some other leaders in Washington sit for a full day and learn about what other countries' assessment systems do. And the consortia that have been funded to revise our tests for states across the country have a mandate to create tests that are more open-ended, include writing and research and measures of the Common Core standards that involve teachers in development and scoring of the assessments. All of that, I think, emerged from a process of trying to create a more international conversation about what assessment could be.
And that all started with you. I mean,
well, I played a small role in it along with a lot of other people.
But at that level, that's a huge role. I mean, he's definitely, maybe he does have your book on the bedside table.
I'm not sure.
You never know.
I want him to read chapter 8.
Okay. We'll note that.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What haven't you accomplished that you'd still like to achieve?
Well, I have a friend who tells a story about how his mother said, you can't stop working until the work is done. And for me, the work is being sure that we build an education system in this country that provides an empowering education for all children. And I have this little T-shirt that says, God put me on this earth to accomplish a certain number of things, and at the rate I'm going, I'll never die. It's a big job, and I expect to be working on it, until,
So retirement's not necessarily in your future.
Yeah, well, I might retire, but I won't stop.
Retire to spend more time on these types of initiatives and projects. Okay, now to a set of introspective questions. First one, who most helped you become the person you are today?
Wow, that's a great question. So many people have helped me become the person I am today. I would say, in one sense, my husband and my children, Alan, Kia, Elena, and Sean, because they've taught me so much about, how to be a good person and a wife and a mother, and how to experience life in a variety of ways that I would never have otherwise had the opportunity to do. I would say on the professional side, I think back to the influence of my earliest mentor, Bernie Watson, at Temple, and he really had a huge impact on the kind of professional I became, which is someone who engages the world of practice and policy, not just writes about it, because he couldn't sit still, and the fire that he had, I think he communicated to all of his students.
And you got some of that fire
I got a
possibly
little
from
bit
him.
of that, yeah.
Sure. What inspires you?
I am inspired by great teachers. I just think it's just extraordinary to be in a classroom led by a great teacher is just, it's a work of art, it's a joy, it's awesome. I mean, literally, it's awe-inspiring, and to see the ways in which great teachers are able to help kids, recognize things that they didn't know before, to see kids become so self-assured and to begin to own their own lives and their own knowledge. I think that's amazing.
What do you find uninspiring?
Well, I think I find ignorant policy suggestions very uninspiring. There's so many things that we have tried before that are, that didn't work, aren't going to work, can't work, don't make sense, that come up over and over and over again. And they derail us from doing the real work. So I'm very uninspired by reform, quote unquote, that is, misguided and ill thought out.
Repeat the same behaviors and expect different results. The
That's
definition
right.
of insanity, right?
Exactly.
What is your favorite word?
Justice.
What is your favorite curse word?
I can't say it on camera.
What profession other than your own would you have liked to attempt?
Music. I almost went down that path. It's the road untaken for me, and maybe I'll go back to it someday.
What profession other than your own would you not have liked to attempt?
Oh, man. Well, one that I decided not to attempt was music teacher, because it's much too hard. I mean, these people know every instrument, and they can teach little kids and big kids and orchestras and bands and choruses, and they run around and teach at multiple schools, and my hat is off to the music teachers out there.
And they're going to be thrilled to know that,
Yeah.
I think. What's your favorite movie?
Well, I have so many favorites, but one that came to my mind when you said that, not because it is pleasurable, but because it was so powerful, was Sophie's Choice. And that's how I feel about the work I do. In fact, I get teared up just thinking about it, because when we went to see the movie, there's this place where Sophie chooses between her children. And the theater is utterly quiet, except for the sound of me sobbing. I mean, I just completely lost it. My husband was like, it's like, how can you choose? And that's what I feel we do in this country. I feel like we choose which children we're going to let die, which children we're going to consign to, a school to prison pipeline. It's an untenable choice. So that actually is what I think about when I get up in the morning and when I go to bed at night.
There's your fire.
Yeah.
What's your favorite book?
Well, I will say I read The Color Purple in one sitting, through the entire night when my kids were little enough that I had to be up in the morning to get them to school, and I said, I can't afford to be doing this. It's a great book on so many levels. Reading the autobiography of W.B. Du Bois now, and that was pretty good too.
If you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
John Dewey. Just because.
Just because.
One of my friends once said, John Dewey plagiarized everything I thought before I thought it. So that would be one.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates? You made a difference. What are your words of wisdom for graduate students and young faculty aspiring to be educational researchers, philosophers, theorists, and the like you?
I would say, number one, be extremely well prepared. Don't avoid the classes when you're a graduate student that, you think you won't use or are afraid you won't like. Take all the qualitative and quantitative methods courses, take the statistics courses, know the system from multiple angles and have the tools to be able to engage it properly. Be respectful to practice and to practitioners. Understand how hard that work is, and if it's not work that you've done yourself, have the grace to be respectful about it. Don't assume that you could walk in there and do it. Try to understand what people are actually doing when they're doing that work. I would say be aware that if you want your work to have legs and to travel, you have to do much more than just publish it in journals that other researchers read. Mm-hmm. There's always this question about research into practice. Mm-hmm. You don't actually get research into practice by just publishing it in a journal. You have to be thinking about how are you preparing practitioners so that they can use this work, how are you translating the work so that it can be usable to practitioners, policymakers, or others who are out there trying to improve schools and systems. So you have to figure out how to have a wide enough view to understand how the work walks its way into the places where you'd like it to be used.
And that even comes down to the college level in terms of what they reward, publications in traditional academic journals or publications in practitioner types of journals that are usually devalued. I completely concur with you on that. Yeah. When asked to capture the essence and nature of Linda Darling-Hammond, Barnett Berry said you are the Michael Jordan of educational policy. Prudence adds you are one of the most grounded human beings she knows. Lonnie adds that not only are you fearless, competent, and compassionate, but you have raised 3 wonderful children just like you. Carol Lee said, what she admires most in you is that despite all the demands of your professional life, you still keep your family at the forefront, and through everything you have not faltered. Sharon Robinson agrees, your most significant accomplishment has been your family, especially your children. Sean said, if not for your research and your advocacy, there would be thousands of children who would be without the benefit of a qualified teacher in their classroom. That's where you've had your greatest impact in your son's mind. Yet you remain humbly brilliant. Words that your other friends and family commonly use to describe you also included brilliant, fearless, passionate, fierce, and tireless. They added that people should not underestimate you, that there's a tiger behind your smile and calm demeanor. Well, Well, there is no doubt we all love Linda Darling-Hammond and the humble, brilliant, yet fierce, fearless, and tireless tiger who serves all of us at the center of educational policy, education, the center of practice, and the center of such uncertainty. We thank you so much for being you and for everything you have done for us, for future educationists, researchers, and especially the students who have touched and impacted thus far in your life. Thank you.
Thank you.